So you joined me on a little bit of a POV video. There's going to be a bit of commentary in this, but the idea behind this POV drive isn't the usual silent ones that I do, but this is actually my shakedown route, where I take a car out and I evaluate how it's driving and if there are any problems. So it's a similar route that you have probably seen on some of the other POV drive videos that I've posted before. It's a loop local to me. There's a nice variation of different types of surfaces and conditions that I can put the car through to see how it responds. And then the idea is, you know, by the end of it, I should have an idea if there's anything else I need to be worried about. You in a hurry, mate? If there's anything else I should be worried about in terms of the car itself and any other work we need to do. I've replaced the exhaust bracket, the centre one, which was the main thing that was worrying me today, and I've also sorted out the, or hope I've sorted out the leak on the power steering pump. And again, I'm just going to drive it now on a loop, and we're going to see how we do and see whether or not I have any more problems. So this is just going to be a drive I'm going to record and see how I get on. I always have trouble with angles with this, so I apologise in advance if all you can see is the headlining or whatever else. I'm also doing it at dusk, so the roads are a little bit quieter, because one of the things I do want to do is press the brakes quite hard in this car a few times, hopefully while there's little or no traffic about. I'll see how well I get on with that, and may wind up having to do it much later at night. But anyway, like I say, this is my little route. I'm going to head out from here, and I'm going to drive towards Duffield, then towards Carsington Water, and up, down and through that way. And like I say, we'll see how the car behaves and how the car handles. And when there's a relevant point, I'm sure I will say something. Like there. There's definitely some noise on that back end under braking. Definitely. Yes, definitely. I might give them a harder press when I come off this, if I can. If you hear anything rattling, by the way, that's because I forgot to, the exhaust bracket I didn't fit, I forgot to put back, so. Definitely got something going on that offside rear brake. Which we need to look into. Just going to go a bit harder on the brakes here. They do work well, but when you do light touches, there's a bit of a... There was nothing behind me then, by the way. I did look first. Yeah, it's funny, you only really notice that judder when you get up to about 70. And then you brake from a higher speed. When you're braking 50, 60, you really can't hear it. Again, it's something I'm just going to have to keep an eye on. It's continuing the Geartronic tradition of being in far too low a gear for the speed that you're doing as well. Me of my T5 some ways. 40 to 50 my T5 always used to feel like it was kind of in between gears, is probably the best way to describe it, and this seems to do the same. In fact, it's actually a little bit surgy at 40. I might take a look at the ignition coils on it as well. I think I could probably do with plugging this into somebody. If there's anybody I know who I follow on Twitter or wherever who's got Vida, please let me know, because I think I could probably do with plugging this in and just checking and seeing and making sure that there aren't any codes to worry about. I mean, that said, it generally doesn't feel too bad, but just occasionally it's a bit as you're going along. That, of course, being the technical terminology for the sound that the sound and the feeling it makes. Generally, it's not bad. And the only other thing I could do, I suppose, is drive my dad's 25T XC90 again and see if that's the same, because to be fair, the way it's going through the gears sounds pretty similar. And my XC60, which has got the later TF80 SC gearbox, can be a bit back and forth like that as well. Don't think these earlier gearboxes lock up the torque converters in the same way that the later ones do. So I think below 40 miles an hour you get quite a slushy disconnected drive, but it does make things smoother, I have to say. Yeah, these P2s aren't the sharpest handling things in the world, I've got to be honest with you. But doesn't seem too bad so far. I'm sure I've got something smeared on that windscreen, because those don't correspond to any scratches I saw earlier. Headlights don't seem too bad either. Oops. Put that over to that. I can try main. Dipped. Yeah, it's just doing a little bit of surging there. I mean, the only other thing to remember about these as well is there's pretty much nothing sporty about the P2 chassis. Yes, you can improve them, you can polybush various things. A lot of people polybush the subframe mounts, but I'm really not looking to sacrifice the comfort on this car, because if I want something sporty, that might well be whatever my second one winds up being. What I'm really looking for out of this is something I can get into and point at Scotland and just drive and drive and drive and arrive refreshed and relaxed at the other side of it, and not feel like I've you know, necessarily driven super sporty. But on the same token, I do want to be able to make reasonable and controlled progress as well, you know. So it does need to go where you point it, but it hasn't necessarily got to be the absolute last word in driving and handling. Got to say, this windscreen seems a hell of a lot more scratched than I remember, which really doesn't make any sense. I think there is something on the windscreen from earlier on that's causing me a problem. Unfortunately, I don't have any microfibers in the car to deal with that, which is a little annoying. This hill is always a good test of a gearbox, because it's very steep. And again, my T5 always used to be all over the place going up steep hills. I'm just curious to see how this behaves. Yeah, it's doing a little bit of the same sort of thing, but no different to what I've encountered and experienced before. Right, now are they actually going to stay? Oh, okay, they're backing onto the drive. I'll let them off. I was ready to get cross then and say they were signalling, but they decided to take off, but they didn't. So stand down, Dave. We'll ignore the fuel economy going up that hill, which was down to about 9 miles to the gallon. Eek. Oh, I've got some squeaks and rattles to track and trace in this thing. Squeaky chair as well. No. Oh, Richard, you weren't joking when you said this had a few rattles in it, were you? Oh well. By contrast, I suppose when you drive a car where everything's quiet and you've just got the one bloody rattle, it drives you half mad. Whereas this, I've got things rattling everywhere, so it's kind of not quite as bad. I also probably wouldn't normally drive it without the radio on, but obviously this more than likely winding up on YouTube, I don't particularly fancy a copyright strike either. Yeah, so this is a route that I drive a lot in various different cars that I've had and owned and borrowed, and it just gives me a chance to evaluate how they feel, because it's a road that's familiar to me. Like I say, it just gives me a chance to get a little bit more familiar with everything. Right, there is nothing around, so I'm actually going to do an emergency stop when we get on this flatter bit here. Just see how it responds. They don't seem too bad. I'm going to do one more emergency stop. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yeah, they certainly work okay. I like to do stuff like that so that I have a good idea how the car responds in an emergency. I know that might seem a little bit reckless out on the open road, but I'd rather do this on a car, on a section of road not long after I get it, and evaluate how that behaves, than get caught up in a situation where I have to press the brakes hard and then I discover that, you know, maybe one of the calipers is binding or whatever, and that braked nice, straight and true for me, so I'm happy enough with that. The other thing you really should do, to be honest with you, is you should go out and you should give your brakes a hard press once in a while, because if you don't, you don't get the full travel out of them, and again, you may find yourself in a situation where you need them in an emergency and you won't have them. So again, I know that might seem a bit extreme to do on a POV drive video, but I would recommend to people that they do that. Now I've done that, I'll also then see how that rear brake's behaving at 70, just in case, because it could just be that caliper was binding ever so slightly, and just doing that little bit of emergency braking there might free it off. The one thing it does tell me is that I don't think the adhesion on these tyres is that good, however, because the brakes on this really shouldn't be able to overwhelm the tyres, and I think they did, going by what I could hear. So tyres is definitely going to be on the list. I am running these, I think, about 2 psi higher than recommended. Well, I say recommended, they give a range, I think it's between 31 and 36. 31 psi in any tyre size in a car this weight is ludicrously low, far too low. You're going to be wanting to run higher tyre pressures than that. Not necessarily the 36s and 38s that some people do on the forums, but I've just put a couple of extra psi in for now, and it seems to be riding well enough on them. Absolutely fine. So yeah, so far so good. I'm pleased it's not squirmed horribly under braking. Like I say, that means that most of those bits must be okay, and I can't have any major sort of suspension or steering problems either if it's straight. So it's just handy to know that, should that requirement to stop in an emergency come up, because you just never know. Oh goodness, what's going on here? Okay, this could be fun. What the f*** is this? Guessing either somebody's getting married or something's going on. I don't normally see this number of cars parked up there. Unusual. Confuse the gearbox then, but never mind. Again, I'm not going to race or rally this down here. It's still a time of day where there could be cyclists out. This is approaching Carsington Water now. It's quite a popular cyclist route as well. Anyway, I think for the moment I'm going to shut up for a little while, and I'm just going to drive and listen and evaluate. maybe folks out and about by the looks of things. Well, you can probably see much now because it's probably getting a little bit too dark. So if you get another clunk. Yeah, just a little clunk. Not a terrible one. There's definitely just a little clunk going in back into first. Alright, let's try manual mode. So all I've done now is I've locked it into fourth, which is what I would typically do. Combination of fourth and third on this more twisting road. Well, fifth and sixth actually in the XC60. We'll just see how it copes. Record-breaking headlights, but they're not awful, I've got to say. For halogens, they're better than I thought they would be. Both of the P2s I've had previously have had xenon headlights, and again, I don't know how well you're going to be able to see this on this camera. I didn't whack the ISO levels up, and I think I'm running GoPro colour as well, which will make everything darker annoyingly. But it's really not too bad at all, those headlights. They're much better than I expected them to be. And they'll probably be even better still when I've cleaned them up a bit. Wasn't sure where he was going then, so was saying, I'm in an old rust bucket, supposedly. I've got no trouble reeling these pair in, although to be fair, neither of them are driving particularly quick. The manual mode is very smooth. I've got to say, it's loads smoother than the manual mode on the XC60 is. Stick it back in drive now. Had me little moment. Probably get another clonk here, I'd imagine. Yeah, you can hear it go donk, but it's not offensive. You know what I mean? It's not kind of throwing me, which was the main thing I was worried about. Because you do hear about these things having bad boxes. Although I can't count my chickens yet. You know what I mean? We've got to see how we go. But there's nothing I've heard so far outside of what I remember as just the normal drive shaft noise on my my T5, to be honest with you, so it doesn't sound bad at all. And these P2s don't have particularly good engine location control, I think somebody described it as. The mount design is a bit poor, so even when everything's new, the engines sort of thump around in the engine bays, a little bit like that. Do you remember that scene in The Simpsons, early days, where Homer gets called into Mr. Burns' office, and I think he's got some form of heart condition, and Mr. Burns is tearing him a new one, and there's a picture of Homer and a picture of his heart bouncing around inside his chest cage. Quite gruesome, but that's kind of the analogy. I know it sounds gross. I think about every time I think about these gearboxes and how the engine control works, or the engine location control works. They're just a little bit too sloppy, really. And again, that's why people polybush the top mount and do various other things. And if you want to do that and that's your bag, that's fine. But me, I'm nearly 40 and I think that I will trade a bit of comfort over that. What this experience of driving this is really making me think, though, is perhaps I ought to go out and drive a P2 XC90. Because if it's anything like this, I think I'd probably be very happy. I can't explain it really, because I think I said the other day, dynamically, my XC60 is far better than this car, far better. It'll go around corners better, it'll stop better, it's safer, there's more grip, you know, I probably even feel more secure in it. But I don't know, I just like the way this drives. Isn't that weird? You know what I mean? Isn't that weird how something can be better, but yet I like this more? It always doesn't make sense, does it? I guess that's the whole weird car thing that you know, has been going on for the last few years. I don't know, if this continues to behave, I could just quite happily see me pointing this at Scotland and going there, or going to Wales in it. Or doing some form of just longish road trip in it, you know. It's just got a feel about it. Just a pity about that windscreen. I'm gonna have to look at that when I get back. That's either grease or scratches. I think it's grease. Somebody else in a hurry? there's a clonk on takeoff as well. I think that's drive shaft related, personally. Way. Idiots. Never a good idea just to stop when you're pulling out. I had read it, but even still. The thing that makes me laugh about these petrol Volvos is they're geared like diesels. So I mean, this is 50 miles an hour, it's doing 1500 RPM in top gear. Which I think is, yeah, and this is fifth, it's a 5-speed box. 1500 RPM at 50. I think my XC60 is ticking over at more than that. It's crazy. They're much better than I thought they'd be. Much, much better. I was ready to drive this in the dark and go, oh my god, these are like, you know, glowworms in jam jars. But they're really not bad. Not bad at all. I haven't really, other than a few squeaks and rattles, made any other notes so far. I think I'm going to have to look at the brakes. I mean, I've just stomped on them hard, and I'm happy with them from that point of view, but I do think that it would probably be wise to give them a bit of a service. Now is that this I can smell, or something else? Temperature gauge is okay. I can smell something. Okay. Oops. That said, with this time of year and my nose, that could be nothing. Could even also be just the heater circuit kicking in because the temperature's starting to fall out there a bit. Or it could be me, because basically I've been crawling around all day trying to get this sorted. Decent set of tyres on this would make a huge difference. I think what I'll probably fit on it though, if I'm honest, is just a set of all seasons. I have been fitting Michelin cross climates a lot. I don't know if I'll go for cross climates again this time or try something else. Obviously they were, I don't know if they were the very first of the game. I have a feeling that them and Goodyear with the Vector 4 Seasons were both sort of around at the same time. Yeah.